Hi there. So right now I'm just going to talk to you about how we can find the vertex of a parabola from completing the square. Okay, so we have this, we're given this equation here, y equals x squared plus 4x minus 7. And the question might be, find the vertex of this parabola if you were to graph it. Okay, so that's not the easiest thing to do. There's a couple ways you can do this, but one way you're going to learn in school or you're going to learn right now is called completing the square. So it's just a different way of writing this um, equation in standard form into something called vertex form, which is going to tell you, well, the vertex. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to look at the coefficient in front of the x squared and see if we have to factor anything out. Okay, so there's an imaginary 1 there, right? This is like 1x squared. So if it's a 1, we don't need to factor anything out. The first step you do is you put brackets around the first two terms, and we always leave the last term on the outside of the brackets. Okay, so now that I have my brackets, you're going to keep the x squared as it is. Okay, we're going to keep the 4x as it is, and we're going to add and subtract a term inside the brackets and keep the negative 7, okay? So if we want to keep the overall value of this the same, we have to add and subtract the same number. So let's say we added 1 and then we subtracted 1. So adding 1 and then subtracting 1, it's just going to give us 0. So we're going to have the equation that we had before, right? So what numbers do we add and subtract here? Well, we take the b value, or the number of the second term inside the brackets, we divide it by 2, and we square it. It's kind of a weird sequence. It comes from a derivation of calculus, but it's not super important. All you need to know is you take the coefficient of the b term inside the brackets, right? You divide it by 2, so right, it's 4 divided by 2, and we're going to square it. Okay, so this equals 2 squared, and this equals 4. So the number we add and subtract is going to be 4. Okay, so now that we've added and subtracted 4, like I said, this is just going to be 0, so the overall value hasn't changed. And the last thing we're going to do, or not the last thing, but one of the last things, is we're going to take this term we subtracted and move it to the outside. Okay, so instead of leaving the negative 4 in there, let's keep those three terms that we have, x squared plus 4x plus 4. We're going to close this bracket off and just move this negative 4 outside. Okay, so if we move that negative 4 outside, what's negative 4 minus 7? Well, that's going to be negative 11. So we have x squared plus 4x plus 4, right? And then we have minus 11. And now all we have to do to complete our transformation into vertex form is we take the b value again, we divide it by 2, okay, and that's what we're going to have adding from x. So if we have x squared plus 4x plus 4, right, we can think of two numbers that multiply to 4 and add to 4, right? That's 2 and 2, so that's like x plus 2 squared. But whenever you're completing the square, a kind of a handy trick is once you have these three numbers here, right, all you need to do is take the b value of what's inside like we did before, divide it by 2, and that's what we're going to be adding to x. So it's going to be x plus 2, and then all of that's going to be squared. Okay, and we still have that negative 11 here. I'm going to do another example if that's confusing, but that's kind of the process there. So this is going to be our equation converted into vertex form. Okay, and what this tells us is, well, let me just write it out. So vertex form is equal to a times x minus p. Sometimes it's p, sometimes it's k, sometimes it's h. Teachers use different kind of notations. Squared plus q. Okay, so if we're subtracting p and we're adding q, this is going to be the x coordinate of our vertex, and this is going to be the y coordinate of our vertex. So if in our equation it was x plus 2 squared, what's our x coordinate going to be? Well, lots of people, when they see this, they say, well, our x coordinate's going to be 2. Well, no, because in the original equation, it's x minus p. So if in our equation it's x plus 2, it's going to be the opposite of plus. It's going to be minus, right? So our x-coordinate is going to be -2, right? And our q, in this kind of formula here, we're adding q, and in our equation, we're subtracting it. So once again, it's going to be negative. So this is going to be the vertex of the parabola if we were to graph it. Okay, so your answer would be -2 and -11. Okay, so that's how we complete the square. Let's just do another example here. So now I'm going to do an example where we have a coefficient in front of the x squared. So I'm going to say y equals, let's go 2x squared plus 7x. Okay, let's go plus 6. Okay, so what's the first thing we do? Well, we go y equals, and like I said above, in the last question, this was a 1, right? That was an imaginary 1, but now we have to factor out that 2. So it's just kind of an annoying process, but something we've got to do. So if we factor out a 2 and we expanded it into x squared, we would get 2x squared back, which is perfect. Now, if we want to multiply this 2 into the second term and get 7x back, instead of just writing plus 7x here, we have to write plus 7 over 2x. Because if we did 2 times this 7 over 2x, we would in fact get 7x back. So that's what we're trying to do. And remember, we close the bracket off after the second term, and we still keep that plus 6 there. Okay, so remember from the last question here, we had that 2 factored out, x squared plus 7 over 2x. And remember, we take the b value of the second term, right? The b value of the inside second term, divide it by 2, right? So that's like multiplying by a half, and we're squaring it. Okay, so 7 over 2 divided by 2 is like 7 over 4, because we're kind of just doubling the bottom, and we're squaring that. Okay, so the square distributes into the 7 and the 4, so this is like 49, right, over 16. Okay, so we're going to add 49 over 16, and we're going to subtract 49 over 16. Okay, plus 6. And I purposely did this question because the fractions can get kind of ugly, and I just wanted to go through it with you so you didn't see it for the first time on a test or something. Okay, so don't be intimidated by these fractions. They're going to come up when you're doing math, unfortunately, so kind of just got to deal with them. Okay, so y equals 2x squared plus 7 over 2x plus 49 over 16. Okay, and like I said before, we want to try and bring this last term inside the brackets outside. So we can't just say on the outside now 6 minus 49 over 16 because we have this coefficient 2 factored out. So anytime we want to bring this term out, we have to multiply it by what we factored out. Last question it was just 1, so we just brought it out, but this time it's 2. And negative 49 over 16 times 2 is just going to be it's going to be negative 49 divided by 16 divided by 2. Right? So 16 divided by 2 is 8. So essentially what I'm saying is this fraction is going to become minus 49 over 8. Because if we have 49 over 16 and we multiply it by 2, this bottom here, this 16, it's going to become half as big. So this is going to be 49 over 8. Okay. So our fraction now is 49 over 8, and we're still adding 6, right? We're still adding 6 on the outside there. So now if we want to kind of bring this home here, get into vertex form, it's going to be 2 times x squared, or not x squared, sorry. Remember, we're leaving it as x plus, we're taking the b value of what's inside and dividing it by 2. So 7 over 2 divided by 2 is 7 over 4. Okay, and that's being squared. Okay, now we kind of got to deal with this. So we have to get a common denominator, right? If we want to combine these two numbers here. So if we have negative 49 over 8 plus 6, right? The common denominator is 6, so we can multiply the 6 by 8 over 8. Okay, and this is going to give us negative 49 over 8 plus 6 times 8, that's 48, so it's 48 over 8. Okay, and negative 49 over 8 plus 48 over 8 is going to give us negative 49 plus 48 over 8. So this is going to be negative 1 over 8. So that's essentially what we have on the outside now. And we have our vertex form for this equation. We just completed the square, so now we can kind of analyze where the vertex is going to be.